Well, that got interesting with Caleb Calhoun. I'm Dave Hooker, and what looked like a surefire two-score victory. Suddenly, Billy Napier's team, despite his best efforts to undermine them, had a shot to win the game at the end, and a game that Tennessee seemed to have in hand throughout the second half. And then suddenly, just insanity broke out. But nevertheless, the end of the story, the moral of the story, is that Tennessee gets an absolutely monumental win in a lot of different ways, and we'll get to that. Caleb Calhoun, how are you, sir? I imagine you did a little bit of rewriting. You can check out his rapid reactions, my report card on offthehooksports.com right now. Obviously, the grades were good. They had to be altered with the onside kick recovery that, man, if that's the NFL, correct me if I'm wrong, Caleb, but he's allowed to advance that, I believe.
Are they in the NFL? I thought you can only return other teams' onside kicks in the NFL, but you can't do
Okay,
that in
yeah, okay,
college.
yeah, I think you're right. I think you're right there. Okay, my apologies, but it definitely got wild and woolly. But in the end, congratulations, Tennessee. And I want to say this to all the Tennessee fans out there. Please enjoy this. You deserve it. It's been a long, long run. This is a monumental victory. And no matter what they did last year, or no matter what they did a couple of weeks against Pitt to pull that out, this is of a different ilk. When you look at some of the milestones, if you want to call them that, that Tennessee was able to reach, they were very significant. First of all, the most obvious is that Tennessee hadn't beaten Florida in quite some time, so the Vols survived and watched their second win against the Gators in the last 18 meetings between the two teams, first since 2015. And I tell you what, it was a pretty impressive victory in that they also snapped a 6-game home losing streak against ranked opponents by beating Florida, who almost stunned the Vols with a late score and a recovered onside kick. So, Caleb, let me go ahead and just kind of get your thoughts. Take this where you will, and then we'll kind of hone it down and look at it position by position.
I mean, you're right. It's supposed to be. You're supposed to think of the positives. Tennessee shouldn't. I said this 2 weeks ago when they beat Pitt. They beat a ranked team on the road. Don't care how they did it. They beat them in overtime, and no one should feel bad. I can't. I couldn't go there this time though. The thing that stood out to me the most was the situational defense and the way the secondary played. I mean, Anthony Richardson threw for 450 yards. Now, I know we're going to talk about most 400 yards games, and they certainly was in this case, happen when a quarterback is throwing a lot because he's trying to lead his team back into the game because he's down, and that was the case for Florida. But it almost worked with Anthony Richardson and Billy Napier. I think knowing that he's playing Eastern Washington next week, which is not a bad FCS school. I want to point that out. I think they're number 14 in the FCS right now. But no, it's Florida. So knowing he's playing an FCS school, I think Billy Napier decided to really go all out with Anthony Richardson in this game and make his legs a factor the way he did against Utah. And I don't think Tennessee was ready for that. I think they thought they were going to see the Anthony Richardson that showed up against Kentucky and against South Florida. And it almost did them in. And maybe I'm too hard on it because Tennessee does have some injuries at cornerback right now. They're without Warren Burrell. Kamal hadn't played, but he did get hurt in the game. And so I think that maybe I'm a little bit unfair, but I don't know. That was a bad performance by them.
Towards the end, it was, and Billy Napier didn't do. Yeah, we heard so much about how he's detail oriented and all that, Caleb. But in the end, Billy Napier, I thought really made some questionable decisions. They worked out on fourth down. That doesn't mean they're the right decisions. And I thought the decision at times to not take easy points was a little bit odd too. What did you make of Billy Napier's approach?
See, I actually the fourth downs I don't mind. I forget his name, and this guy broke it down. It's about 13 years ago. It was an NFL game when Belichick went for it on a 4th and 2 against the Colts with Peyton Manning. And he broke down the win probabilities. And he broke down how often teams are way too quick to punt or kick field goals even on 4th down. So yeah, he missed that 1 4th down at the beginning of the game where he left points on the board, but how many points in the totality, he added a lot. Now, Billy Napier made some mistakes. There's a couple of huge mistakes he made. One, I think he's playing the analytics game a little bit, and the whole going for 2 versus going for the extra point when he went for 2 twice after he was down 30-21, and he should have taken the extra point. That's based on the NFL analytics. Where like, okay, when you're down, you go for 2 twice because you could, you have a chance to then maybe go for a game-winning field goal at the end instead of just a game-tying field goal. That's based on the fact that extra points in the NFL are now further back. So if you were to go for 2 every time and go for an extra point every time in the NFL, you would score more points usually on 100 attempts. Extra point is still a dead center chip shot in college. So it's still an automatic. At that point, you go for the extra point. And if you'd gone for both extra points, we might be seeing Tennessee and Florida still in overtime right now.
Yeah, we wouldn't be talking right now.
Yes, exactly. Exactly. And then we'd be super frustrated because then we'd completely have to rewrite everything. So
yeah. So it is all
one other thing I wanted to, one other mistake he pointed out that I wanted to, because Tennessee was so awful with situational defense, 3rd and 4th down. Billy Napier let them back in the game. They had the ball 3rd and 11 at the 50, up 14-10 in the first half. And he tried to call a trick play where the offensive lineman didn't move at all. And Anthony Richardson rolled out to the right, and it was just a busted play. That made no sense given how Florida was playing. And then they punted. Tennessee scored on a 99-yard drive. That was the play, honestly. Billy Napier, that was a crucial mistake to try to get cute right there.
There were a couple of plays that stood out to me, and one was the very first drive of the game, an 11-yard run by Anthony Richardson. I thought to myself, if they don't contain him, then that's the really only way that I thought that they could lose the game. Now, it turned out to be closer than I thought when he didn't have a big impact with his legs. But then they were able to contain him. I thought that Byron Young got himself in some bad positions early, trying to be a little too fancy and make the big play. This is not a game of making the big play. This is a game of keeping Richardson in front of you. We talked about that all week long. So Tennessee adjusted and did do that. And I understand they were fired up, and Byron Young probably was as well. And he wanted to go out and make a big play and a sack, force a fumble and all that good stuff. But the bottom line is just keep him in front of you. And I thought Tennessee did that for the most part. As far as the rest of the defense, let's go ahead and take a look at what Tennessee did, both offensively and defensively. Let's start with defensively. So the defensive lineman, like I said, I thought that allowing that 11-yard Richardson run was very scary. But then they pulled it together and they played contain. Amari Thomas forced a fumble in the 4th quarter that stopped a deep Florida drive. Dejon Terry, who I don't know that we talked about at all ever, piled on quite literally with a sack midway through the 4th quarter. Feel free to jump in there and stop me when you like, Caleb. But the linebackers, I thought were a B+, and I think you're going to tell me now that that's probably a little generous, and maybe after the way things went down it was. But we did see Jeremy Banks show up. He's more and more active as the season rolls on. I don't know why the slow start. He had a big hit on Richardson, recovered a key fumble. They need him more and more. But as you pointed out before, Tennessee still struggles in middle-level pass coverage, and I just don't know that changes. I mean, I think that's who essentially this team is right now. I don't know that that's going to change.
I agree. And I think, honestly, because of that, you talked about, you're right, that 11-yard run by Richardson, one of the reasons they kept things in front of them was they kept the linebackers in spy, I think, for most of the game after that. But you're right. If the linebackers are going to struggle in coverage like that, you might as well send them on blitzes. I mean, you might as well send them after the quarterback. I know it's Anthony Richardson, so it's a little bit different because of what he's done with his legs throughout the year so far. But if they're going to leave the middle of the field open like that, your best chance is to get pressure on the quarterback. There were times I thought I'm not going to blame Tim Banks too much. There were times I actually thought they had the right package dialed up, and you talk about Byron Young, and you're right. A lot of players took the wrong angle on a blitz. There was a third down conversion by Anthony Richardson. I think it was in the first half, may have been in the second, where Trayvon Flowers had a clear gap to him. And I mean, he would have sacked him in a heartbeat, but he tried to come around the outside thinking Byron Young was going to lock up the inside. And then they both came on the outside, and Anthony Richardson had a easy hole to find a receiver through on a third down pass. And I think you saw a lot of that in this game. I know Trayvon Flowers plays safety, but not linebacker. But I think there was a lot of that. I think you're right. The linebackers are just going to have to start bringing more pressure throughout the year. I think this was a change of pace for Tennessee because, yes, last week they kept talking about how they had the preparations for the RPO quarterback because of Akron. It's still Akron. They're still probably at their roots most used to what they saw against Pittsburgh, which is a drop back passer, pro style offense where it just standard get pressure on the quarterback. And that's not what Anthony Richardson was. Pittsburgh, which is a drop back. And so I think that this is, I would give, I don't know if I'd give him a B plus, but I don't put too much blame on the linebackers in this game. Their job was really, like you said, to keep Anthony Richardson in front of them. And outside of that first run, they did that.
As far as the secondary, as we continue to break it down, I gave the defensive backs a C minus. Vols missed a tackle on the first drive in the secondary. It tended to be a sign of things to come. They gave up a touchdown of a series of missed tackles. Then the ship was righted. Tennessee gave up 439 yards passing against Florida. There were at least 5 missed tackles that I counted. Kamal Hadden was called for a holding penalty in the fourth quarter, but also registered 5 tackles with 1 for a loss in the game-clinching interception. Thoughts on the defensive backs?
You're giving them a C minus. Do you think they deserve a passing grade?
Yeah, but C minus. I could be talked into. I could be talked into lower than that. I certainly could.
Yeah, I'm going to give them an F plus because there were a couple of nice little tackles for a loss. I'm not giving them credit for that interception at the end of the game. That was a desperation throw by Richardson, and that was more actually the pass rush that got it. I thought they were horrendous. I'm going to be honest, and I don't know necessarily if it was so much the safeties, but you're right. It was the mid-level pass game again, but they got beat over the top a lot this time, which they haven't done in the past. There was that 4th and 2 where Kamal Hadden just got torched over the top. And Anthony Richardson, yes, dropped the dime, which nobody expected Anthony Richardson to do, which I guess we all should have expected that because that's what Florida quarterbacks do when they play Tennessee. But
well, you're not wrong there.
Yeah, and so I think that I just have a hard time, but I'm going to be fair again. The quarterbacks are super banged up right now. If there's any place where Tennessee's banged up, it's in the secondary, and I think that's really starting to show. And that's not like the offense, whereas they showed tonight. You got Vols time on the side. I was just reading the chat saying to cheer up Tennessee won. So I will talk about the positives on this point, which is that Tennessee, unlike the secondary, can replace their weapons on offense, as they showed tonight.
Okay, wait. So can you see the chat on your end? Because I can't see the chat on my end for some reason.
Yeah, I can see the chat on my end.
Okay, so you're officially going to be our call screener, or they used to call it in the Vol network, the telephonics controller. That's what you're going to be, because for some reason I'm having a technical issue. Guys, I can't see any of your comments, but we're going to go to Caleb. So, Caleb, give me a couple of pertinent ones before we turn to the offense, because this, despite how it ended, despite the mistakes, let's keep in. I think we really need to keep in context. This is just the beginning of year 2. This is a game that previous coaches, including Philip Fulmer, would get tight for because of the way it's played out recently. So give me a couple of comments, guys. I would have gone to you earlier, but my chat screen's completely blank. So you should. But I do want to say this for all of you out there watching. We appreciate it. Go ahead and like, subscribe, and share, especially share, because we want to enjoy this with you. I was very happy for Tennessee fans, and I thought that it was fantastic. And our guy Jacob Warren had a 47-yard catch that if he makes one guy miss, it's a touchdown. And we'll talk with him tomorrow on Off the Hook Sports. But Caleb, what are we hearing from the message board?
So Vols Times got 2. He says Hendon Hooker won the quarterback battle. which again I agree. Even though Anthony Richardson had more yards, Hendon Hooker won the battle. I think that some of Anthony this game reminded me, some of Anthony Richardson's yards reminded me, and this just dawned on me, and it's one you remember. It reminds me of Peyton Manning's 400 yard performance in '96, I think, against Florida,
Yeah.
where like Florida was up 35-0, took the foot on the gas, and the Vols almost came back and won like late because Peyton was just desperately throwing it all over the field. That was kind of Anthony Richardson's game, I think, in this one. So I think I agree with Vols time. Hendon Hooker won the battle. And I also agree that, yeah, maybe we should be a little bit more cheery about Tennessee winning. And as you brought up, that is very true. DHurt8955 says taking the foot off the gas on the last drive was stupid and almost cost them the game. I actually did agree that was the wrong decision. I thought that it didn't seem like they were committed to trying to get another fourth down or trying to get another first down. And, anything can happen in those situations. So I thought Tennessee's offense should have been more aggressive right there.
All right, so Hendon Hooker, let's look at him. I don't see how we can't give him an A+. I thought he was very decisive against Florida. When he ran the ball, he ran it with purpose. One of those scrambles, though, I just hate watching him run, to be honest with you, because I think so much rests on his shoulders, no pun intended. And one of those scrambles ended up with him being driven in the turf on his right throwing shoulder. But here's what I took away from that, where you could be a little bit scared if you're a coach. And if you don't have that complete trust in Hendon Hooker, maybe you hold him out for a series to get the trainers to give him a further look. But when Hendon Hooker looks at you and he says, "I'm fine," then that's the kind of trust you get in year 2 with a guy, as opposed to maybe year 1. So I thought that said a lot about the communication on the sideline. I thought that was strong.
I agree. I think Hendon Hooker definitely has the trust of the coaches. I mean, and he, again, he took that and he came in hurt. And I'm not going to give him an A+, but I'm going to give him his mental and physical toughness an A+. We're talking the guy, he gets hurt on a fourth. The reason I'm not giving him an A+ is because of that fourth down fumble that he had. I criticized his pocket presence in the past, and that it kind of showed up there. Plus the 2 missed throws, one to Jacob Warren. There was another touchdown he had too. A couple of missed throws and then that fumble. So I give him an A. I give his mental and physical toughness an A+ because he gets hurt on that fourth down. He says he's good to go. He comes back on the next drive. Tennessee has the ball on their own 1-yard line, down 14-10, almost halftime. Neyland Stadium's quiet. Everybody's like, here we go again. Tennessee's just going to find a way to lose to Florida. And he marches them 99 yards for a touchdown. Had help from an amazing diving catch by Ramel Keaton that he kind of overthrew there. But for the most part, Hendon Hooker did a great job. And I think I'm with you. There are intangible things with quarterbacks that are just kind of hard to measure as much as stats speak for themselves. But I think you can, his teammates play really hard for him. And I know that's cliche to a certain degree, but I think Hooker, that and his toughness. And I didn't mind him running as much in this game because, again, Tennessee has a bye. He can rest up and get healthy. I think this was a game where I'm going to be honest. I think Tennessee had to win this game for the state of the program. There were too many things going on around college football right now that I think Tennessee really needed to win this game for its morale. And so I think you go all out with Hooker, go to the bye week, let him rest up and get healthy for LSU. And I think that's what they did.
Yeah, I guess I'm thinking more along the lines of a significant injury. That's the thing that I think is scary for Tennessee. But again, they avoid that, and that's part of football. So I mean, that's just kind of where Tennessee is. But yeah, also I would add this with Hooker. I felt like when he hit his back foot for all but 1 or 2 plays, that he knew what he was going to do with the football. I really thought that, and maybe 1 or 2 plays, he got pressured. I don't put the fumble on him. I thought that was a blown assignment up front, and it was a strip as he was getting ready to throw the ball. So it's not like he was holding the ball loosely around his waist. I didn't have a problem with that. But just the decisiveness, where I think at times that he hasn't displayed that to me was the biggest takeaway I take from Hooker. When he hit his back foot, man, he knew where he was going to deliver the ball, or he knew he was going to run pretty quickly. And I thought that was impressive.
I agree. I agree. I actually, I thought, as a matter of fact, there was a play where I don't know if you remember this. I was listening to the CBS crew, and Gary Danielson was criticizing a decision by Hooker that I thought was the perfectly right decision, which was it was near the goal line. Tennessee was up by 3 in the second half, and Hooker took a pass, and he had Brew McCoy where he could have hit him on a line drive, but he decided to throw it away. And Gary Danielson was like, he should have line drived it right there. He could have gotten the touchdown. I'm like, it was second down. You got 2 more downs to get the touchdown. And yeah, I think Hooker made the right move. Throw it away right there. Why, even if you can convert it, why try to convert that when you're so close? And I think
I,
he,
I thought the very same thing. I thought that he was trying to get rid of that ball, and there's absolutely nothing wrong with it. Well,
right.
I don't say get rid of it. I thought I would give a slight chance to drop it in there, but I actually thought that was a fairly accurate throw in that he wanted to float it a little bit. If the receiver makes a great play, fine, but just don't turn the ball over. That was one that really stood out to me too. It's funny you brought that up.
Yeah. Yeah. It's, and that's, and decision making like that by Hooker was great all night. I think he was great with his decision making. He was tough. He, it's, I mean, then there was that long run he had where the play was busted up and he should have been sacked in the backfield. And it was a 40-yard run in the third quarter.
Hmm.
And I mean, that was all Hooker right there.
Totally agree. And yeah, I did. I thought the way that he escaped the pocket was really nice. He was incredibly patient too with the run. If you recall, he set up a block downfield, just a lot more savvy than we've seen in the past. Not to say he hasn't been savvy. I don't want that to be misinterpreted, but that to me was incredibly savvy. That is a team that has a quarterback that feels comfortable in his own skin. And Tennessee didn't have that uh, at all for this recent run of futility. But there were times they didn't have that last year with Hooker. So the running backs, I think Jabari Small was healthy. I think we can go ahead and put that to rest.
I
You?
agree. Totally agree. Jabari Small was healthy. He was exactly what he's supposed to be. Not only did he get 90 yards on the ground and have that long run, he was physical. He had those. And I can't stress this enough. Tennessee doesn't convert those short yardage plays last year. Those goal line plays, those goal line runs. By the way, that first Jabari Small got in on that touchdown that he was rolled behind on, but he got
Yeah, and they struggled on the Richardson play too. It was I thought the officials really struggled on goal line calls, which was very odd.
I
Um,
agree.
I thought the officials also there was at one point I believe it was Darnell Wright got a little shove and maybe a little touch of the face mask after a play, and I thought they had. I will give them credit on that, even though there were some questionable goal line calls. I thought that they did a good job of letting the emotions be a part of the game, but not override the game. I got the feeling that after that little shoving match in the back of the end zone, that the very next play, the next dude that did that, whether it was a Gator or a volunteer, that there was going to be a flag. I really got that feeling at the end or at that point.
I agree. I think that was smart to let them get a chance to control it before it gets too crazy. The only part I wish they did take over a little bit was in the second half. Amari Burney, he had 2 horse collars on Hendon Hooker, 2
He did.
clear as day horse collars. And, that's, I was talking earlier because you were right. You talked serious injury versus just getting banged up. Luckily, it seems like for Tennessee, Hooker just got banged up in this game going into the bye. But that you're talking broken leg on that one if something goes wrong. And he should have been flagged for one of those.
No, I think it's a very very dirty play. You'll probably help me remember this. Who was the former Oklahoma standout who played for the Cowboys? Who I
Oh,
really
Roy
like.
Williams.
What was that? Roy, yeah, Roy Williams.
Roy
It was.
Williams, yes.
That's the rule. I mean, it's the Roy Williams rule,
Yeah.
essentially. And I always hated that because he was one of my favorite players as a Cowboys fan. I was like, but that's just dirty. That's just
It
not.
is. It's so dirty.
I mean,
And
it's like, and he would do it actually designed where even if he could have tackled the guy straight up, he would kind of let him go by him and then make a
and
play.
also Roy Williams doing that set in motion, the destruction of a potential like Super Bowl team because he breaks T.O.'s leg. T.O. fights his way to get back for the Eagles Super Bowl. he actually plays well and McNabb doesn't perform and they lose the Super Bowl, and then T.O. feels a type of way that McNabb is vouching for Brian Westbrook to get a contract extension and not him in the offseason because of that. I mean, you wonder how that all could have gone different if that's going way off track.
The wide receivers, best group on the team. I mean, without Cedric Tillman playing with the ankle injury, they still looked really, really, really good.
Easily best group on the team. They also incorporated the tight ends in this one, as we talked about. Jacob Warren's catch, he would have had a touchdown on another one. Princeton Fant had the fumble, but Princeton Fant had 3 catches for 45 yards still, and a key third down catch that's underrated in the first half. So yeah, I think that I think the receivers played incredible, and I've always liked Ramel Keaton, and I've always felt bad for him because I feel like he just hasn't gotten to play because of Brew McCoy and Cedric Tillman, and now I'm validated in feeling bad for Ramel Keaton because if he was in any other team in the SEC, he might be starting. I think we're underestimating how loaded Tennessee is at wideout this year. And I didn't think Jalen Hyatt would have the game he had either. I thought they weren't really going to go with those slants or crossing routes that much, but Jalen Hyatt was very effective helping to move the ball.
We want you to like and subscribe. Please share as well, as we will visit with Jacob Warren tomorrow. And well, it depends when you're watching, on Sunday, and we'll get his thoughts on the game. I imagine he will be quite pleased. This was a monumental win, as I said, for Tennessee. Let's continue with the report card before we get to your rapid reactions. Or actually, since you can see the chat board and for some reason I can't, we got a couple of other comments. Let's get those.
Yeah, a few of those actually. Brian Merchant says Hooker needs to learn to get down. I agree. I actually think in this game it was a little bit different, though, because I think they needed to incorporate Hooker into the run game, given what Florida was doing. And so I think it was a little bit different in this game. It wasn't a desperation scramble and slide.
I know that Brian Merchant guy, very, very insightful young man, maybe a former intern. Go ahead.
Oh, okay. All right. Added that nothing was going to help the Eagles beat that wagon of a Pats team, since we talked about T.O. and Roy Williams. Brian also said that. Daniel L. says, go Vols, crazy officiating. Yeah, it was crazy officiating. Vols time gets back in, says, I have to give Florida credit. That last onside kick was something else. I mean, they didn't quit. And the last one, this is a good question from Vols time. Do you guys believe Tennessee's recruiting will get even better after this game? I think yes. I think, how could you, if you're a prospective recruit and you're in that stadium, not get swept up in the moment?
I completely agree. And I'm always the guy that, covering recruiting for years, I don't put too much on one game, but I will put a lot on, let's say this, I don't put too much on one win, but I will put a lot on one game in that environment. They were able to pull it off. As crazy as it sounds for it to be less than a touchdown game, I thought they were pulling away and dominant at one point. I thought, but able to hold on. Yes, all of that I think is a monstrous boost in recruiting. So I think sometimes we overplay one game or one win, but in this particular situation, I'm not doing that at all. As far as offensive linemen, going back, I gave the receivers, just so you know, a B plus. And really the only reason I didn't give them more, that includes tight ends, would be Princeton Fant's fumble on the first drive. But, man, that was a great play by Ventrell Miller, the Florida linebacker, to punch it out. So I could probably be talked into an A, but still a fumble's a fumble in my mind.
You want to talk about a flipping of the script, by the way? Last week when we were so convinced that Florida would be an easy go, we didn't know Cedric Tillman would be out, and we thought Ventrell Miller would be out. Ventrell Miller being able to play and Cedric Tillman being out, I mean, that was a huge stimulus package for Florida. Just wanted to
history. How much does that guy remind you of Brian Cox? Remember him?
Oh gosh, did he play for
linebacker, Florida? I thought I was watching the same guy. Not to sound like an old dude, but yeah,
he played for Will Muschamp, right?
What's that?
He played for Will Muschamp, right?
Brian Cox. Now I think he's a little bit older than that. I think I may be going back before even your time. So Brian Cox. Oh, you're thinking of oh my gosh, now I am incredibly old. You're thinking of Brian Cox Jr. Oh man,
Oh, I'm sorry.
that was really, really brutal there.
Yeah,
Yeah,
sorry. I don't really remember. Didn't watch in the 80s, Dave. I'm sorry. I know like numbers and things of history and stuff like that, but yeah, and particularly I wouldn't have been watching because Tennessee wasn't playing Florida annually in the 80s anyway, but yeah.
yeah. Brian Cox is 50. The one I was referring to is 54 years old. He had a great career with the Dolphins, and that's just kind of who he reminded me with. He is now a defensive line coach, but that's who I was referring to, and now I feel just really, really old. So
I'm
I certainly
sorry.
appreciate that. But he played for Western Illinois, but he just reminded me a lot of him. Not to get sidetracked, but that kind of middle linebacker, you really don't see those type of guys a lot anymore. And then so I gave the receivers a B plus. It sounds like what you said. They've gone ahead and given them an A. Would you have given them an A?
Yeah, I'd give them an A. I'd give them an A. I think Princeton fan also made up for that fumble with a couple other nice catches, and Jacob Warren had his grab, and I can't get it. Wide receivers alone get an A plus. I don't think there was a bad play the wide receivers themselves made all night, including some of them did a good job blocking. There were a couple of Hendon Hooker runs in open space that went a little bit further because of receiver blocking, and so I can't say anything bad. The tight end, if I spoke with the tight ends alone, I'm going to talk. I'll say B because of that fumble. But if you combine them together, there's no way I cannot give them an A.
I could roll with that. I was at a strong B plus. Offensive lineman, I gave a B minus. Again, I thought the Javonte Spreggins on the first drive, there was a false start on him, some pushing and shoving that I thought was really close to getting to drawing a flag. But I thought the Cooper Mays snap. I really think this. I'm going to ask Cooper about it tomorrow, but I really thought that was where he saw somebody jump off sides, and it was a high snap that looked like it was his fault. But I think he's just trying to get it done and get them and get Tennessee 5 yards. I'll ask him about that tomorrow. I don't think that was necessarily a bad snap. It's just like he just wanted to get it off while the guy was off sides.
Oh, I could actually see that, and it's funny if that is the case. That I'm hedging on the grades, particularly for a guy like Cooper Mays, because honestly, I thought Cooper Mays, in terms of actually blocking, did an amazing job. He was the one blocking. Is it Desmond Watson, the 400-pound Florida defensive tackle for most of the
Yeah,
night?
he's pretty small, isn't he?
Yeah, and I mean Cooper Mays pretty much handled him. I think a couple of mistakes. I agree. Even though I still blame Hooker for holding the ball too long, that definitely was busted protection where he got sacked and fumbled, and he got sacked a couple of times. The chippiness. I think Jerome Carvin got chippy too at one point on that play back near the backfield. And then you're right, the two penalties, and then the Gerald Mincey holding penalty. Here's one for you. That's the second time this year Gerald Mincey's waved off a Hendon Hooker touchdown run because of a holding, and then Hendon Hooker went right back and threw a touchdown pass the next play.
Yeah, that's exactly right. Yeah, the other one was to Tillman, right?
Yep, Tillman in overtime against Pittsburgh.
So is there something I don't know? Is there like a nickname with Hooker that's Himdon Hooker, Himdon, or has the SEC network forgotten to spell his first name, Hendon? Am I missing?
Is that showing up on SEC Network right now?
I got it right here. It says Himdon. I'm holding it up for those watching on video. Himdon Hooker.
Yeah, I don't want to.
Am I missing? I mean, I could be missing a nickname because I'm old. I didn't know there was a Tennessee squirrel till today. But nevertheless, the graphic that goes with it is, I hope, accurate. I don't think his first name is, but 45 total touchdowns, 2 interceptions.
Huh? Yeah, insane.
That's. I mean, you would. I want to fact check that, but I know it's right. I mean. I'm 100% sure it's right, but I still kind of want to fact check. It just is unbelievable.
Does that say 2? Because actually, I think he has 3. So I think SEC Network got that wrong too.
Well, this would be they say as the starting quarterback. So did one of those come
So we're not going
in?
to count the Pittsburgh game.
Yeah. So I think that was the difference. All right, let's go to your takeaways. But first, hit the like and subscribe button and turn your notifications on because we're going to visit with Cooper Mays and Jacob Warren on Sunday, as we do each and every Sunday. So you'll want to make sure and take advantage of that. Share, share, share. Comment below. It helps us. We want to hear those comments. And what do we have? We have some other comments there since for some reason my
Yes.
board went up.
D Blario. I apologize if I mispronounced your last name. He says that is a nickname, or he or she, I'm sorry, says that is a nickname, that Hooker is a him, implying that he is the man, apparently. So, according to D
Okay.
Blario, it is a nickname.
Okay, I'm the king of bad nicknames. They need to drop that one. That's horrible.
It's an awful nickname. Totally agree. It's right there with Skip Bayless's Psycho Tom for Tom Brady, which I'm like, of all the things.
I mean, if you went him to man Hooker, I could almost see that. But okay, nevertheless, what else we got from the message board?
So we got from Tennessee Vols Insider, defense needs some work, but Tennessee would have won by more with Cedric Tillman. I could see that. Cedric Tillman may have helped, but at the same time, I can't really say that much. I mean, the offense scored 38 points, and they only didn't score on 3 possessions. So I wouldn't worry too much. Gene Phillips, I'm too old for this. Go Big Orange.
I mean, that's what I was thinking. I was like, I mean, I think Caleb and I were pretty much done with our columns and ready to file. And
Yeah.
speaking of, let's get to your takeaways.
A couple more I wanted to throw in. Brian Merchant says Brian Cox was a Chicago Bear. And then Daniel L. said it looked like their O-line was jumping constantly in person. Did you all see that? Not sure if you're referring to Tennessee or Florida on that, but maybe Tennessee.
I didn't see that. If that was the case, I didn't see that. Let me address that recruiting question really quickly before we move on to your rapid reactions, and we'll continue reading your comments. But 11 5-star prospects were at the game, thanks to the other Caleb Giroux. He 11 5-star prospects. Like I said, I've covered recruiting a long time. I've never heard of that. Now, that's not all the upcoming class. That includes like Nico, who is already committed to Tennessee. But as far as can it help in recruiting? Well, big HE, you know what? LL, yes, it certainly can. You had the 2024 class highlighted by 5-star Tennessee commitment Jonathan Eccles, who was scheduled to be in town. Wide receiver Ryan Wingo also. Now he went to the Pitt game too. I think he's one to watch. When you start visiting players that aren't even and at other locations on away games, that says something. Boo Carter was in attendance on Saturday. Also, 2024 5-star prospects. Jarrett Gibson, offensive lineman Daniel Calhoun, King Joseph Edwards, athlete KJ Bolden, and linebacker Sammy Brown. 2025, you had 5-star athlete Cameron Sparks. So I mentioned Nico. One to watch, though, is 5-star defensive lineman David Hobbs taking his official visit over the weekend. So, yeah, I think it can only help you in recruiting. So let's hit that chat board one last time, and I want to get to your takeaways. We might hit it a couple more times, so go ahead and keep following. Anybody else up there that wants to?
Yeah, Daniel L. Responded with the question. Daniel L. said was apparently asking if it looked like Florida's offensive line was jumping a lot in person. That might have been the case. I will say I was a little suspicious on the lack of pressure Tennessee's defensive tackles got in the middle, but I did think that was more about keeping Anthony Richardson in front of them, like you talked about. So it's possible.
Yeah, I hear good things about Amari Hand, and he flashed. I thought
Amari Thomas.
Amari Thomas, excuse
Your
me.
age showed then too. I remember Amari Hand.
Yeah, I covered him very closely. Amari Thomas. John Adams told me this would happen when I got in my late 40s. And I said, no, I always remember. Amari Thomas, he flashed as well. I thought he did a fantastic job. You know, Tennessee, the greatest challenge, and Amanda always makes fun of me, but the War Daddies is what the coaches call them. And those are those defensive tackles that can move and that are also 320 pounds. Well, Georgia didn't have that when Kirby Smart took over. Alabama didn't have that when Nick Saban took over. That's really those are the toughest dudes to get that can really move at that size. I would argue that they're almost as tough as a good quarterback because of the freedom you have on offense because of the rules. I think Elijah Simmons has that sort of ability from the people I've talked to. He just has to really, really keep working hard and keep his weight in check. But yeah, so some of your takeaways, Caleb, if you want to go ahead and throw those out there.
Well, I think the first one, I don't think there's any doubt now that, well, the first one, actually, the thing that stood out, my top one was going to be about Hendon Hooker, but with the way the game kind of ended, secondary play was atrocious. I think we've talked at length about just how bad the secondary was in this game. It was problematic. But I think that Hendon Hooker's Heisman campaign is off and running. Not saying he's going to win the Heisman. I would still put way more money on Bryce Young and maybe even Stetson Bennett. But I mean, I don't think anybody can no one can seriously look at how Hendon Hooker played in this game and not think he's in the conversation at this point. He was tremendous, and I can't look past that. So Hendon Hooker is definitely keep an eye on him. Brew McCoy had his breakout game. We talked about Brew McCoy or Ramel Keaton earlier this week. Which one I kind of came to your side that Ramel Keaton might actually be the one to be the star to step up because he was getting the first team reps. There was talk around Brew McCoy, but Brew McCoy was the star. He had over 100 yards and a touchdown. Now, a lot of those came on that one busted coverage where I don't know who Florida decided to bracket air and let Brew McCoy run past them. But we talked about Billy Napier. He helped out a lot with some mistakes, the 2-point conversions and the third downs. And honestly, I will say this about the offense. Outside of that first drive, for the most part, the offense was pretty clean the whole game. There was the fumble on the fourth down, and there was the holding by Gerald Mincey, and there was a formational penalty way late in the game when they were trying to run the clock out. But outside of that, I didn't see any really. I mean, yeah, we can talk about the missed snap, but that was nullified because of the offside penalty. So I would say the offense was a really clean performance by the offense after the first drive.
Yeah, I was impressed. Your takeaways. What were your strongest takeaways as we'll go back to the message board here in just a second. It's on offthehooksports.com.
My biggest takeaway is Hendon Hooker and the mental toughness of this team. I think that it's really hard to overstate anybody who's followed Tennessee, Florida in the past. Tennessee doesn't take 99-yard drives down 14-10 going into halftime. They don't do that, particularly with a banged up quarterback in the history of the series. That just doesn't happen. And so I think it's the mental toughness of the team, but also the major concerns with the pass defense are the two biggest ones. And also that, yes, there is still a football god that works overtime to try to make sure Florida beats Tennessee because it seemed like that was happening in this game.
Yep. Fair enough. All right. Anybody else on the message board want to chime in? Is anybody else out there?
Yeah, we got a few. D. Blario adds in that the defensive backfield made Anthony Richardson look like a Heisman candidate throwing the ball. Was that part of the scheme to keep him from running?
Yes. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah.
And give Anthony Richardson some credit. He stepped up and played well for the most part. I mean, they were going to keep him in the pocket. He was going to have to make throws, which he had struggled with because of injury or confidence issues. Who knows? But no, I mean, that's, I mean, he stepped up to the plate. I mean, give him credit. He played pretty well for a guy that a lot of people had question marks about.
Oh, I agree. I mean, I think the game plan from the start was make Anthony Richardson have to beat you. And if he does, shake his hand. And you're right. And I agree. He answered the call exactly like you said, and he delivered. It wasn't enough, but there were a lot of other things happening in that game, obviously, that weren't his fault. Vols time adds, how about that Princeton Fant? I got to give Heupel credit on this, by the way, with Princeton Fant. He's good for one mistake a game, and I've noticed that the last 3 or 4, every game this season. He had 2 against Pittsburgh back to back. He has that fumble, and I think everybody was ready. I mean, if you went on Twitter, it was bench him. He's always making a mistake a game, and Heupel went back to him, and I got to give him a lot of credit for doing that because a lot of coaches wouldn't do that.
Yep. Hit that like and subscribe button so that we can be a part of your Tennessee and SEC coverage. Turn the notifications on because we'll have Jacob Warren and Cooper Mays on Sunday. So we're looking forward to that. And that'll be on our YouTube channel. Again, subscribe. We greatly appreciate it so we can bring you more. So he's Caleb Calhoun. I'm Dave Hooker. Have a fantastic evening. Vols win in a big one. This is a presentation